The Dentalpreneur Podcast. Okay, doctor, it's time to put down that handpiece. You're listening to the show dedicated to helping dentists get their lives back. It's time to decrease your stress, increase your profitability, and regain your passion. Now introducing your host, Dr. Mark Costas.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Costas. What is up, my friends? I hope you're doing great out there today. I'll tell you right now, it is freezing in Prescott. I am just about over it. I am right in the middle of the winter blues. It's been like in the single digits and teens every morning, and it's been like cresting at like 28 degrees in the afternoon. Yes, this is Arizona, believe it or not. And I'm just ready for some warmth. But I'm super stoked today because I get to hang out with one of my great friends, co-founder of DSI Black Belt coach, super successful practice owner, Dr. Addison Killeen. What's up, buddy?
Not much. Here in Nebraska, it's not that much warmer. It's like 13-degree high will be Sunday. So I think you and I are both dreaming about beaches and palm trees and just getting out of our home states.
Dude, I've never, ever, I have 4-wheel drive, big jacked up truck, Chevy Silverado, 2017, nothing fancy, but great in the snow. I've been stuck on my own driveway 3 times. 3 times. That's in 4-wheel drive low. It's been so icy because we have patches where the sun never hits. So even with the plow just pushes the snow along and just makes it a sheet of ice. So, dude, I know. It's first world problems, right? It's not like I don't have a heater and I don't, I have a very comfortable environment in the wintertime, but it's cold. It's just cold.
Yeah. Well, and if it's cold enough, on my driveway, I slipped this morning going to the gym just because it's cold enough that even with ice and salt melt, that it's frozen. So yeah. I totally get you. Got to look forward, to those CE meetings in summertime or when you can get south. Yeah.
For sure. Well, hey man, what's new in your world? You've been super busy at the chair. You've been very, very clinical. I mean, it's been like a 4 or 5 month stretch where you've been working almost every day, which is rare for you, and just grinding. So what's going on in your practice?
Yeah. Basically we hired a new associate, 2 weeks ago. So we're deep into the onboarding, of this new associate. One of the biggest things was finding the right person to match our culture and our style and what we needed. So it wasn't quick. It took those full 5 months to market for the associate and figure out exactly, who we wanted. We were lucky to find a guy, he is exiting the Navy. And so he was the year behind me in school. So I've known him for more than a decade. And he's actually a dual trained. He got his oral radiology specialty. So that's kind of cool.
Did he do that he must have done that in the Navy then, right? In
the Navy, yeah. So it wasn't a Navy-sponsored program, but he got into San Antonio. So he was based down there for 3 years. Okay. And so it's kind of awesome. It's a weird skill set to have in practice for a private practice. At least most of these folks do academia and just go teach somewhere. And he just said, no, that's not for me. And I want to live in Nebraska because he's from here. So it's kind of cool. So it's weird to have a dentist that is more knowledgeable than me. I mean, there's lots of people more knowledgeable than me, but just sitting side by side and he can just rattle off like, well, that looks weird. I think it could be these 5 different diagnoses. And 4 of those diagnoses, I don't even remember in the oral path textbook. So maybe that says something about my grades in dental school too. But
I wasn't great in pathology.
It's really cool. But it's weird. We put out the dental associate manual about a year ago now, and so even though he is wildly more educated than myself, it's a switch because I still need to hold him accountable to how we do things here in our practice. And so he's following the same exact onboarding schedule and cadence. And, I'm checking treatment plans with him. I did that yesterday for the first few treatment plans. I said, when we see crowns and we do class 2s, I need a bite wing of each one of those for the first 10 cases. And I just said, you know what, like I'm sure you're totally good, but this is just how we do things, to make sure that you and I are on the same page, and that from there on out, I don't have to, worry about checking in with you quite as often. So it's kind of weird to hold someone that's more educated accountable to how we do things, but it's the right thing to do.
It really is. And if the awkwardness really goes out the window, if you just say, hey, look, here's our office policy, and here's the onboarding manual. Like, we do this not just because we don't trust you, or, because you're fresh out of school. And in that particular case, it's like every single person that works for us in this particular role goes through the same exact, pathway, the same process. This 30, 60, 90-day expectations, these clinical oversights, and these quality control kind of meetings. All of that happens with everybody. I remember that, like, one of the first people that I ever put through like an official associate onboarding was like a 53-year-old that had tons of experience and had been working for 30 years. And he's like, I think I'm good. And I was like, well, we have to calibrate. We're going to do this for every single associate that comes on from here on out. And you might be helping me, and you might become the clinical mentor and the clinical director that actually implements these for future associates. But for now, let's calibrate. Let's make sure that our philosophies are in check, because, you put 10 dentists in a room, you're going to get 10 different treatment plans for the same patient.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Those toothpaste ads about 4 out of 5 dentists agreeing are full of,
Which 4 dentists agree? There are no 4 dentists that have ever agreed on anything.
So it is true though. And that's what I told him, is that, after we look through this treatment plan, if you have better ideas, then let's teach me, so that, we can just serve the patients in the best way.
Right. It's not this corporate philosophy where, like, you have to do this, you have to have, 12 crowns in 12 days. And it's not that, right? It's just calibration, making sure that you guys share the same outlook and philosophy.
Yeah. And it truly goes back to the hiring process. And, I sent out 1,200 letters to in the associate manual, we have this kind of recruiting tips of how to do this. And so I got a list of everybody in the nation that has a Nebraska license. We sent out letters. It was a 4-page letter that had like FAQ on it. So, hey, this is how the contract's going to be. Is there a possibility for ownership? Yeah, most likely not. Like, we're not interested in that. What does the job look like? What are our core values? What does that mean? Mm-hmm. What can you expect to make? All answering kind of a ton of questions. So how many applicants did we get? We got like 6 applicants out of 1,200. And so I was pretty happy with 6.
Yeah.
And it boiled down to this one was the best, but it truly goes back to the day that their employment starts with you. Like, day one is not the most important day. I think the day that you start interviewing them is the most important day, so that you can weed out. Not that the other 5 weren't great, but it was just like, well, this one would be our best match for our core values and what we need. And quite honestly, being more picky in the interview process gets you to a better starting point day one, so that you can get to a better point a year or 5 years from now, rather than, just like, oh, well, I just need anybody. And then you go into that cycle of turnover, and that costs you a couple $100,000 every time you turn over a dentist.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you brought that up, because there is, when you're going through these checklists during this onboarding process, we have what we call module 1 or basis. And there's there's 3 pages of a checklist that have to happen before they actually start their first day of work, and it's just silly things, but they're very important things. Like, they have to know where to park. They have to know what the expectations are for, showing up on time, what the meeting schedules are. They have to bring in their DEA license and their malpractice. And there's a number of different checks that have to happen. So you're not wasting time. They hit the ground running. You make sure that your bases are covered completely as far as all the legal stuff. And then you move forward after that. But yeah, the more structured you can make it, and the more you can kind of turn over in your head the things that you could possibly anticipate, before they start work, that's really important. But then what really needs to happen in the first 30 days? What really needs to happen in 60? And then after the 90-day period is over and their onboarding is officially over, what does this person have in their brain as far as like, this is how we do it here? Are they totally clear on the core values? Are they totally clear on the treatment planning philosophy? Are they totally clear on like the way that we treat all the other people in the dental office? It's really, really important. And it actually makes me shudder to think how long I went without doing this formally, and just kind of winging it. It's like, all right, you know what to do. You went to dental school. All right, I'll check on you, in a couple weeks, and just let me know if you need me. That's not an onboarding process. And I have to say, I'm guilty of doing it that way for a lot of years. And you can only in rare occasions is that going to be successful.
Well, and quite honestly, I think a lot of organizations still do it that way. And, then they wonder why, this associate only lasted 2 years. Well, at the 2-year point, you're still not making a whole lot of money on that associate. Like the first 6 months, you're probably losing money. Second 6 months, you break even-ish. And then you start to be a little bit profitable. So yeah, the more that you get those systems in place, the speaking the same language, even reading the same books, we, in our onboarding, I think like yours, it's, read this book, like The Ideal Team Player or Raving Fans or Extreme Ownership. So that when we say the words humble, hungry, and smart, you know what I'm talking about. We can have an adult discussion. And, it's kind of like, it's those things that you want with an associate, where if they don't know your language, whether it's from organizational language or treatment planning language, when we talk about, hey, this is how we treatment plan or present something, it's just super important all around.
For sure. So you're recently at our mastermind meeting in the beginning of January. Huge turnout, beautiful location, Scottsdale Princess. It was actually nice to have some sunshine. It was a little warm. It wasn't as warm as Scottsdale usually is that time of year, but it was nice. So you had your own hot seat group and you take lots of coaching calls throughout every month. What have you seen as some of the kind of common themes for 2023 in your coaching calls and in your personal hot seat group?
Yeah, our hot seat group was an interesting mixture of a lot of floor plans. Actually, I think in our group we had 4 floor plans. Everyone seemed to just come over to the office and say, "Hey, can I print off my floor plan and pull it up?" So it's growth. A lot of us post COVID have just seen a lot of shifting of patients around in the community because COVID gave them an opportunity to reset. Yeah. And so we have like a wonderful member up in Chicago. She was able to buy her own building, and she's redoing it into it's going to be an amazing dental office. But it's one of those cases where the width of the building is it's in that middle ground of, well, it's not wide enough to have 2 great big hallways with a big middle section. And yet it's not narrow enough to just have 1 hallway. So, it's kind of like, okay, what do you put in the middle? Do you try to fit some operatories in the middle of an O-shaped hallway or, different ideas. The joke is that, it's like, oh, of course it's under the subway. And she's like, no, it actually is under the L. And I said, is that what that is in the picture? And she's like, yep, it's going to be loud. Like, well, that's downtown Chicago. So
really? Yeah.
Did
she buy the building?
She did. So it's going to be a great long-term investment. But she can't expand the building because once you kind of touch the exterior or try to put a second story, changes the parking requirements. And once you trigger that, she would have to tear down half the building to actually hit the proper parking requirements. So as long as she doesn't touch the exterior shell of the building, she doesn't have to add any more parking, which everyone in her neighborhood already walks. So it's okay. But a lot of growth issues, which is great. But it does beg the question, at what point do you start kind of assessing how big you want to grow? Like, what's your final end goals? What does that look like? And
what's the reason?
So it's just kind of interesting.
What's the reason for growth? You get around a bunch of alphas, as you've seen this happen over and over again, right? You get around a bunch of alphas and, so-and-so has, is working on their 16th practice, or so-and-so is working on their 25th operatory. You get in there and you think that, all the the cool kids are expanding and have these gigantic either single practices or multiple practice groups. And we have one couple who I'm talking about in Florida, who work out of a little 5 operatory building they call the Smile Shack, and they crush it. And from the beginning, people are like, well, you need an associate. You need to go find another location so you could double in size. And they're like, well, actually, we have a multi-million-dollar EBITDA business here. We love working together side by side. They're a couple. We love our lifestyle. We don't want to expand. And it was like at that moment, this was several years ago, it was at that moment I was like, you know what? That is so funny. That's the first time somebody has said that, but it's great. I love the fact that they identified the fact that like everything is perfect right now. Their overhead, they might be the first group member ever to get in the 20s as far as overhead. They're trying to do it just for 1 month. They know they can't sustain it, but they might get to 29% overhead, which is unbelievable. But if you think about, a multi-million-dollar practice with, 35% EBITDA, and they're doing all the production in the practice, they're doing good. They're doing just fine. So there's no reason for them to expand and take on, another $4 million note when they're debt free right now. It's I don't know. Growth isn't always the answer, right? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, and the growth, like, what are you going to do with that money? I think you and I are both reading the book right now, Die with Zero by Bill Perkins.
Just
and
finished
it's like,
it.
you know what?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, what are you going to do with the money? Like, take more vacations, live experiences, like you're going to go climb Kilimanjaro this year. It's like we can be very successful in our dental practices, but then we shouldn't be saving up millions of dollars to leave our kids, because when we die, our kids might be old as heck too. So it's just like, we should maximize our fulfillment right now, whether that's fulfillment of experiences or giving to charity right now, or, doing things right now, because, quite honestly, today is the healthiest we'll probably ever be. We're still at our peak right now. So I don't know. I sometimes talk to a lot of masterminders about, like, what are you really working for? And hey, maybe you do want to sell your practice and move to California and live on the beach. And even though that shack on the beach is going to be 4 million, but whatever, it's kind of what do you want to design your life to be like, and how do you get there? And we'll help you get there. It's just, you got to have that vision very clear first.
Yeah. It's funny. I talk about the wealth triad, this very, very simple triangle that I draw. On the top of the apex is net worth. To the lower left is your freedom number. And then to the right is your legacy number. And for a lot of people in our group, especially the high achievers that are just hard charging, a lot of times working so hard that they're not seeing their family as much as they should, or they're foregoing experiences for another day of production. A lot of times when they calculate their freedom number, they're already there, So simply put, like if you liquidated everything, your businesses, all of your equity accounts, all of your investment and retirement accounts, all the cash in your bank, if you multiplied that by 4%, right? Your lump sum, your net worth, basically what you own minus what you owe, if you multiplied that by 4%, and that number was kind of coincident with your monthly break even now, then you've already hit your freedom number, right? So a lot of people don't realize that they could right now retire if they wanted to. Not that we're encouraging that in any way, but that's a great bit of clarity. Like I realized that number, I hit that number like 10 years ago, and I didn't even know that number, what the number was, first of all, and I didn't realize that I had hit it. So that would have changed a lot of things. But now knowing that, like, if all else failed, like if I just decided to sell the practice and stop working, which I would never do, I wouldn't have to work again. And so many people are there already and they don't know it, or they're close and they don't know it. I don't know if I
knowing that is the key. But also knowing what gives you fulfillment, because you talk to people who have actually, had big sellouts and whatnot, and then they talk about that and, the guilt of maybe selling it to somebody who, as one guy put it, chopped up your baby and sold it like a PE firm that, segmented out his business and then sold off those pieces. He's just like, oh, it's, if you get pleasure from working and doing your clinical dentistry, okay, well then it's not work. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting issue, and then it is. I guess as a segue into, the other common issues that we see, and we now have at the mastermind, we have office manager breakouts and front office people that come to the meetings, and they do it their own breakout session. And, that's the other, I guess, smoke-filled room that sometimes us doctors will go in and make a mess of, is the front office. And so that's the reason why I wrote this last book that came out this week, which is the front office manual. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, it's taken years and years to fully understand the minutia and the details that go into it. And I know, from your practice days, you got to go up and sit up front every day when you were learning the business and learn how to answer phone calls, how to do insurance and all this. It takes a long time to understand that. So teaching someone that is really difficult. And that's really why we wrote the dental front office manual, is to try to give as many pictures, as many resources as possible to help someone that might be new to dentistry more fully understand, how to talk on the phone, how to sound on the phone, how to bill insurance, how to deal with problem insurance claims, and kind of all the other funky stuff of running a front office.
Yeah. It goes back to kind of understanding how a dollar bill flows through your practice, kind of understanding how to be a sophisticated business owner. Like just because you sit in the back all day doesn't mean that you can just kind of abdicate the front office stuff to somebody that has more experience in that than you do. Sometimes that works. Like for my first 3 practices, I didn't even know how lucky I was. I had 3 incredible office managers, and I was like, this dental practice ownership stuff is easy. They take care of that, and I'll take care of production in the back. And then, at the end of the year, I'll have a certain amount of profitability, and that was easy. But it's like, what happens if those people don't have, your best interest at heart? What if they're not trained correctly? What if like all the systems that they have are currently in their head and then they leave? There's a lot to this whole structure of, the administrative part of the business. And that, we never had formal training in that. That is what I think really perplexes so many dentists and what leads to burnout, because they're trying to learn it and do it while wearing all these other hats, like the marketing hat and the management hat and the clinical hat and now the front office hat and the billing hat, because there's nobody qualified to do that. So I would love it. This is awesome that you wrote this book. I mean, what a long time coming. Nobody else has written a book like this before. And incidentally, what book number is this for you?
This is number 7. So,
number 7. That's it, dude. What are you doing with your life? Come on, get your life together. 3 of those
it's early in the year.
3 of those we wrote together. You wrote By the Numbers, which is an extremely, extremely popular book when it comes to the basics of the numbers in dental practice. And then you and I wrote the Dental Operations Manual, the Dental Acquisitions book, and the Dental Startup. And then you wrote a marketing book, the Dental Marketing book, right? And then this is now the Dental Front Office Manual.
Yep.
Correct. Okay.
And yep. So, and the associate one that we talked about earlier.
That's right. Yep. So, prolific dental author right here, maybe the most prolific of all time. You can knock out a book in about 2 months, and it takes me about 2.5 years to knock one out. But hey, man, let's talk through the table of contents really quick. Like, how can we practically use this manual in our own dental practices? Even if we have, say, a decent front office team, to recruiting a completely new office team, to trying to change a very, I want to say, experienced team that is kind of set in their ways? How do we utilize this manual?
Yeah. Well, so, kind of like when we wrote the operations manual together, we built a scorecard around, okay, what does the most ideal office look like? And if you pass the scorecard, you're a black belt. And, in the black belt, there's black belt systemization score, which is, over 80% systemized. There's also black belt overhead score, which is below 50%. Now, of course, on the overhead now, like we were talking, we have people that are constantly in the low 40s, high 30s. I mean, just it's crazy. So our understanding of how efficient offices can get has gotten better, but systemization and using a scorecard at the start of the process is quite, it's a self-assessment tool. Like, no one else is going to see it, but you could go through with your front office, whether it's an office manager or just a couple people, and see like, okay, of these 50 items that stretches over 2.5 pages, how do you do? And so, for the collections portion, we have created a payment plan for large treatment plans. We created a payment policy for orthodontic treatments. We collect prepayments to hold large appointments that take up significant doctor time. So we have daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly collection goals. So we have each of these sections, which is either the foundation, general systemization, the lifetime patient experience, insurance, and whatnot. Each of these sections has their own set of questions. So 50 questions total, and then you get to see how you're scoring on that. So I think in any sense, that's where you start. And so once you see how systemized you are, then you can kind of prioritize, okay, well, these chapters are going to be good for that, or maybe I can kind of skip through those. It does, though, kind of like you teach, it goes through the general, like, because you and us black belt coaches, we teach you either follow a dollar through the practice or you follow the patient through the practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so we kind of, the flow of the book starts off with following the flow of the patient. So it starts with that new patient phone call or the new patient scheduling online. So we kind of go through, some of the ideals, and then we go through kind of what's the general philosophy behind it. So it's the initial patient interactions, phones, how that kind of goes. We even we have phone call recordings, and go through like bad phone calls, good phone calls. I mean, the bad ones, you think, I mean, it's hilarious because it is just so bad. And you're like, oh my gosh, this sounds like my front office. You and I have listened to so many phone calls where you're like, oh, and so you have the 3 E's of phone calls that you and I teach: the energy, the edification, and the empathy. And so, energy, you got to smile when you answer the phone. And so you and I can instantly hear the moment, like, thank you for calling Callahan Family Dentistry. How may I help you? And you sound like that Monsters, Inc., the secretary from that, like, Mr. Wazowski.
Yeah.
And so we hear that so often when we help our mastermind members with phone calls. So the energy is just it's hilarious. Edification is like building up the doctor. And heck, even if you as a front office person hate your doctor, you can say something nice about the office or the hygienist or whatever. And then empathy. And so a lot of patients, they either say, well, I'm really afraid of the dentist. Well, that's okay. Our doctor is so gentle and we're so great. And you know what? I know how it is to be afraid of the dentist because my dad growing up hated the dentist. So you can empathize with something that they say. There's always an opportunity. So the 3 E's. So we kind of go through those phone calls on an audio clip and a video that goes with the book, and kind of edit and scorecard each of those phone calls. We also give out tons of downloadable documents. So it's like, okay, if I want to sit down with my front office and go through these phone calls, here's a scorecard. Let's check off how we're doing on them. So those resources are great with the book. But then, obviously, once you answer the phones, you're going to do some scheduling. So how does scheduling and blockouts work? What's the best way to block out a doctor's schedule versus a hygiene schedule? We offer some spreadsheets to help kind of plan those blockouts. And then, when you're confirming appointments, how does that go? And then obviously the patient comes in. So how do you greet them and discuss with them how to do like office tours and stuff? And then how to take payments and treatment planning. And then it kind of goes into the insurance and the money side of things, which is insurance plans, fee schedules, claims and pre-auths, different kind of complex claims, which would be orthodontics, or how to use primary, secondary insurances. And then finally, it's, how to pull reports, like what reports should you be pulling? Like if you're a new practice owner, you don't even know what you're doing, quite honestly. So it's kind of like, what are the top 5 reports that I should be doing? So we talk about that. And then it's always the insurance when they deny treatment. So how do you go through some appeals? How do you look at that?
Resubmittals, appeals, denials. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like denial letters. How do you kind of resubmit those to get payment? So kind of like all of the junk that, cause it's easy to just submit a claim. A lot of front office people will know just like, okay, I'm submit a claim. And then it comes back as problematic. Okay, well, that's where it really starts to bog down the system. Like the easy money is the first 70% of the money. But unless you go through the last 30%, well, that last 30% is your profit margin. So you need to have a really tight front office system. And so we spend a lot of pages going through how to leverage the world of insurance to just make sure you're submitting as quick as possible, resubmitting, doing pre-auths, verifying insurance as quick as possible. So we have lots of tools. And then just in general, how should you set up your front office to be efficient? What's the hierarchy? How should it look? If you haven't seen any of our previous resources, like what does an onboarding packet look like? How do you set up, just a general employment kind of, how do you hold them accountable? What should your 30, 60, 90 be? Those sorts of things, just so that, you can have all of the duties kind of listed out, but then, okay, well, who does the duties and how should that look? And so we kind of go through that as well.
Yeah. Amazing. So, tell me some of the high points of what you see people doing wrong up front from your coaching calls. Like, is it scheduling? Is it like that they're putting people that aren't qualified to be billers as billers? Is it that there's one office manager and they're expected to do too much stuff, so they do everything kind of half-ass? Like what are some of the problems you see with the current structure of a lot of dental practice front offices?
Yeah. I think scheduling is a huge issue. And that's why I'm a big believer in block scheduling. So just putting patients randomly where the patients want it to go is a huge issue.
Do you have like the rock, pebble, sand philosophy, or what is your main philosophy on scheduling?
The big picture is that I want to do my best work at the best time of the day for me. Yeah, and so that's, big dollars at 8:00 and 1:00, smaller after that. Usually one column is rocks. The other column is $0 or less important stuff that can fit in easily between larger appointments. Mm-hmm. The other thing would be, I don't necessarily set daily production goals for each appointment. I just set the big picture goal. So each appointment doesn't have to necessarily match up, but generally if it's an hour and a half or 2 hour appointment, that's got to be some implants or some crown and bridge or some expensive things. So one side of that is block scheduling. I think if you do block scheduling correctly, you can hit the new patient numbers you want because you're saving enough spots for new patients, or scaling root planing, which is generally higher revenue for the hygiene department. Mm-hmm. But it's also then training the people answering the phones on the front end to follow those rules and to have a good decision matrix for the patient, so that you say, hey, which day works best for you, Monday or Wednesday? I say Wednesday. Okay, I've got a 10 a.m. or a 3 p.m. And, you might have an 8 a.m. open, but that 8 a.m. is a high dollar appointment. And this is not that, it's a problem focused exam. So, the best way to kind of do the phones to maximize scheduling. And so, scheduling is, I think, one of the biggest issues that I see. The other thing, I think the other biggest issue is that a lot of doctors don't even know enough to ask the right questions of their front desk. So they don't even know, I should be doing phone call evaluations. I should be listening to these phone calls. And so we give you an evaluation sheet. We show you how you should be setting up your phone so that you can listen to the phone calls. I'm a user of Mango, and so Mango records all phone calls just standard and keeps them for a year. And so I can go back, listen to those phone calls and review them with the team member, and we listen to them together so that the team member doesn't even I don't even have to do the coaching. Sometimes they listen to it and they say, well, I could have done better there.
Self-coaching, right? A lot of times, all you have to do is step back and look at yourself objectively, or listen to yourself objectively. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to do my own coaching here. My 3 E's were rough. My energy was off. I didn't empathize when they told me that they were in pain, and I didn't say anything nice about anybody in the practice. Like that's the easiest scorecard ever. How'd you do with the 3 E's,
Yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of a huge thing. So for the doctor to know how that goes. And then even when systems are set up correctly, things just work so much better. And that's a lot of software stuff. Now I use Open Dental. I know you do too. Open Dental has a ton of functionality, and I love it. But if you keep putting in new insurance plans every time, like a patient comes in from an employer, okay, type in a new plan, yada, yada, it creates replications of the same plan, which just mucks up the system. And so in the book, we actually show you how to combine those plans, because they're all the same plan. But if you have an untrained biller, they're going to keep replicating and duplicating so much information, and it just bogs down the system. And there's anytime you put in new information, there's a chance for an error. So you miss on the payer ID, that's a 5-digit number. If you miss one of those digits or type in the wrong digit, well, all of a sudden your claim gets kicked back, and you're like, why did the claim get kicked back? And then you look and it's like, well, I had the address right. I had everything else right, but one number was off. And that was because you created too many insurance plans, and that was the issue. There's just so many chances with insurance for errors, whether that's having a fully correct fee schedule input into the system so you can get accurate treatment plans, whether that's billing correctly, or you start in a dual claims, like primary and secondary claim, you send it to the wrong claimant or the wrong insurance company first. Well, they kick it back. Well, then you got to go back to the primary first and then the secondary. It could take you, 3, 4, 5 months to get your money, and hours of your time, because you're having to resend a claim, and time is money. And so we see a lot of that. It's just a really, I don't know, you could call it dirty, just a dirty process. And so just cleaning up everything, making sure it's streamlined. There's lots of flow charts in here to know, like, okay, this is where I should go first, second, third, follow the process. And really, this is the exact process I use in my practice. And I keep a pretty lean billing department. I have 2 people. Last year, we collected $3.5 million. So there's awesome. One person that does mostly just inputting money, and one person that does all the other claims, pre-authorizations, secondary claims, and all that. And really, you can run a pretty tight ship as long as you have really clean systems. And the systemization, like you and I talk about all the time, better systems leads to better profits without doing another dollar of dentistry.
Indeed. What's your philosophy? This will be the last question. I know you got to go here in a sec, but what's your philosophy, or what's your process, or do you even take on newbies that have zero dental experience and put them up front? First of all, do you do that? And if you do, how do you onboard them? Because there's so much to learn.
Oh yeah. I actually love bringing in newbies.
Really?
Much better than existing billers. And because I would much rather, and when we listen to phone calls and we laugh about how bad they are, it's like, it's hilarious. And so I would much rather hire somebody on personality and phone voice, and just if they're going to match my culture, and then we can teach them. Now, the tools that we teach them, like, we've built some pretty good internal structures to to teach them and test them and whatnot. But actually, like the biggest tool that I use to this day is still Front Office Academy. So it's the online training portion that kind of closely matches a lot of the systems, the beginnings of the systems that we teach in this book. And the Front Office Academy is it's amazing, like tons of hours of video. And basically when I onboard someone new to dentistry, I make them watch Dentistry 101. They learn all the different terminology of dentistry. And then they start going through, how to answer the phones. And then they do, what is insurance? How does insurance work? How do we talk about it? So all those video modules are just super important. And so that's why I would much rather hire somebody outside of dentistry. Now, DSN, it's also a super cheap software to just have. DSN members, they get it for $49 a month. And for folks that buy the Office Manual, you could also get a free 30-day trial of FOA. And so, you and the other faculty members that run FOA have just built an incredibly strong product that can teach anybody, like literally anybody, how to answer the phones in a great way. Kind of just making sure. And, quite honestly, it's sometimes you bring someone from outside dentistry and they are just super happy to serve in a capacity where you get to make people smile. And they are not asking for quite a high of a salary.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So, I'm super stoked for you, man. Number 7, take it easy. Don't overwork yourself.
Yeah.
I would love it if you could share with the audience how to get a copy of this book. Listen, guys, this book is legit. It's the real deal. Nobody else is doing this sort of training in a manual and offering it for just an affordable price. You have to really, really look hard to find anybody that's doing this type of training, but to put it in a book that's this easily accessible is really special. So how do people find it?
They can go to just Amazon.com. The title is Dental Front Office Manual, and or they can go to my website at AddisonKilleen.com. Just AddisonKilleen.com, and they'll find a link to it there. And then you can see links to all the other books that we have out there as well. And so whether you're in a startup, an acquisition, or you've grown enough and you're doing an associate. So all
awesome.
Good books.
All good stuff, dude. Well, hey man, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. Lots of wisdom being dropped as usual. And can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Yeah, thanks. I gotta keep those ideas rolling. So
what is the next one? Do you have an idea? I'm sure you do.
I got a few ideas. Yeah. Okay. So I think, once doctors, have a successful practice, then they're just worried about wealth and health and happiness. And so I don't know how that book will come about, but that's kind of been percolating. And that's what, you and I read. That's our enjoyment right now, is just reading all those sorts of books. So I don't think I can write on health because Peter Attia's got his new book coming out next month. And that 900-page behemoth or whatever will probably take a while to get through. That's
going to be a textbook. Like that's not an audio book. You have to go through that with a highlighter and a number, a 0.5 pencil. But I can't wait. I can't wait till it comes out. I'm going to geek out for sure.
Me too.
All right, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Addison Killeen.